okay? So Bart, we're ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, great. Well, welcome to the first policy committee for 2022. We will have Assistant Superintendent Anthony Bonds is joining us live. Thank you for being with us, Assistant Superintendent. And my name is Rosie Leffler-Camp, and I will be the chair of the policy committee for 2022. And I welcome on this committee two new board members, member Amber Sadowski and member Paul Sanholm. And so excited to have you a part of this our newest committee for the school board. I won't go into much history, but just to let you know, this committee was just established in 2020, in June of 2020. And so it's a new committee. Policies used to go through our other committees in the past, and when we restructured the board, we added this committee to really kind of focus more just on policies. And I am going to have Patty send you some background information just kind of on policies in general. And kind of the 101 on it is we get, which you'll see through our discussion with this month's agenda, is that we have model policies from our school board association. So often if they're new policies, our school board association has legally vetted them, gone through state statutes, and really done a lot of work for school boards to then bring policies to their own district and to either adopt them as is or tailor them to meet our needs. And so some of the information Patty will send you will go over the required policies that we have to review every year and kind of processes around policies that in June of 2020 we spent time on, and then a couple other meetings where we really reviewed those documents again. And so they're a good reference. And for our district, like most districts, a lot of the policies come from our staff. It's brought to us from our staff. They're the ones that when we are revising policies or renewing them, they put the time into it and bring back the recommendations. And so that's something we're always cautious of as a board when we're saying, oh, you know, let's start this policy or let's review it. Is this a good time for us to be doing it for a variety of reasons? Most policies, as Member Sanholm knows, go through 2 readings in front of the board. So, you know, all board members do have an opportunity to give input on our policies. And so one of the things I think that has been enjoyable about this committee is that we look at them and we give feedback. We have an opportunity, just like all board members have, to do research on what other policies, similar policies other districts have as well. So that's something I encourage policy members to do, is go on other district websites when we're looking at our own policies. So that's just a couple background pieces. But for today, our policy for our first reading is policy 526 on hazing. And this is a new policy. And I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Bonds to share background information.
Member.
Thank you for that. And if I can start, I'm not sure. If you can
Just
hear
one
me
second,
clearly.
Mr. Bonds.
Please.
1 second, Mr. Bonds. Sorry.
He can ask. So, just on this particular policy, you said it's a new policy, so we have not had a policy on hazing in the past, for clarification? Or is this replacing something?
I do not believe we have. Is that correct, Assistant Anthony Bonds? That we haven't had a specific just to hazing policy?
I'll be honest, one of the things I was going to say is the owl isn't working and it's really hard to hear. It really sounds muffled. So it's not even, the camera is not swerving towards anyone, and I can really hear you.
Well, I think it's going through this rather than through the owl, it looks like.
Yeah, this is going through here.
But he's saying he can't hear us?
It comes in muffled, but would you repeat exactly what you asked for? I apologize.
Sure, I just, my understanding is that we haven't had a specific policy on hazing. I don't see any history of it, it may have been a part of maybe something else, but I don't believe we have. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is my understanding, that as a district, we have not had a policy adopted, so that's why we thought this would be a great policy to move forward, because it is a policy that is required by the district. So while we don't have a policy for hazing, we do have other policies for harassment,
Yeah.
and a complaint policy where we address any issues that violence.
So one of the things, you will see when you look at this policy, and I'm just gonna kind of explain the layout of it, is all policies that come in front of us will say the purpose, a general statement of the policy, any definitions, will direct the school district to some action, and go on all the way to the bottom, and then there's legal references where the different state statutes that involve this policy, and then they also list other model policies that the School Board Association has adopted or has encouraged school districts to have or require them to have, and they're always listed as well. So we do have some of these other policies that are listed, but then it says the first reading, and so when it comes to you, and when we look at the next, the other policy we're going to look at today, for its second reading, we'll just kind of highlight where you can tell when we've adopted policies in the past. It always has the month, the date, the year, that kind of thing. But yes, this is a new one that is required, so, okay. I'm done with my explanation now. Anthony, did you want to go on?
Yeah, so like you've already shared, this is the first reading. So this is a model policy that we are moving forward. And so the question is, if there are any if there's discussion that needs to happen, or if there are comments or questions related to the policy, I am here to capture the information, and we will address any concerns that arise.
So this is a kind of a boilerplate policy that's come from other districts that we're looking at here?
No, this one is from the Department of Education.
This is from MDE?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it states that in the beginning paragraph.
Yep.
And it does state how in this particular case, how it does differ from the NSBA model policy.
Okay. So are we,
Is there anything you want to highlight in this policy before we start asking questions? Anthony? There were some comments on the fourth page.
Yes, the one thing that's on the fourth page, so there was a question about our reporting system. We don't have a specific reporting system just for harassment. So what we do have is a district webpage that identifies various opportunities for making a complaint, whether again it's harassment, whether it's sexual harassment, bullying, all those things. So hazing will be also added to this website, where a family or an individual can fill a report out and make a complaint. So we don't have an official reporting system just for hazing.
And the other additional comment was, on the last page of it, under school district action, item D, and it included, restorative practices.
Is that something we've added, restorative practices? Or did that come on this policy from, MED?
I'm not sure, Patty, that's the highlighted area.
Yeah, the highlighted restorative, that's the only thing that we added that was
Okay.
different from MSD.
And I think that's a good addition, because I think we're trying to implement restorative practices across the board wherever we can, and wherever they're needed.
I agree.
So, with the reporting, are we creating a form and a website reporting location that people can fill out?
There is within the
I apologize, John, you're probably gonna have to field the questions, only because on my end, the mic there
Is
is
there-
poor quality.
Bart,
and I can't
the
hear
owl
anything.
isn't working at all?
John, just go
It's
ahead.
sounding really
Can you hear John,
poor.
Anthony?
Val's doing the recording, and then Anthony's on that system there. So maybe for the next meeting, I'll switch them.
Okay.
See if that works.
Just because he's facilitating the next meeting too, so just trying to make sure that.
Yeah.
So we can switch it so I'll,
Good thing you figured
for the
it
next
out.
one, we'll,
Yeah.
yeah, good thing we're in this one. So the policy for the means of reporting is, basically through our bullying harassment form.
Mhm.
It can be accommodated for the reporting on the hazing.
Okay, so we're gonna modify or update that form.
Mhm.
Is it only a paper form, or is there, again, a website location that
I'm not
people
sure if
can
there's
go
an
to
electronic
fill out
means,
I,
but I think there
I
is.
believe there is an
Okay.
I
electronic.
believe so too.
And I think it's embedded in, so it's easy to
Mhm.
get to. Now, that's good.
Mhm.
How is that data collected? Like, who collects that data when the forms come in? How is our data tracked for such instances?
I know that's done through the site administration. I could speak to how it was done in previous schools that I worked in. But I could get additional information between now and the next time, but I think that, in general, it's put into a database so that you can refer back to knowing who was involved in what instances, so that if I may be let's just say we're the main people with the conflict, but we have another person that has some involvement in it, that you know who was involved in the situation, so that if now there's a situation between the two of you, you can access that information more easily, because I think sometimes there's multifaceted issues that continue over time, right?
Thank you.
Sure.
So it looks like this form could be filled out either at the building level or at the district level on the district website.
I think right. There's one within the building
If
website.
it's filled out at the building level, does it automatically get uploaded into the district? So more people are seeing it other than just the building principal, let's say.
Yes.
So
Well,
you would see it, so Anthony
No.
would see it.
I wouldn't, but the site administration usually, I believe that the counselors would have access to it as well. So it depends on who has access within the particular site. Usually it's people related to the discipline team, social workers, counselors, and those individuals.
I guess I'm kind of coming from the angle of, okay, who, I mean, you don't want it maybe kept within a small group within a building where they're gonna make some determination that, oh, we don't wanna take this seriously, or, where it's coming out to a broader group of leadership to act on that and or to discuss, you know, the direction that needs to go forward with dealing with it. I mean, I don't know if I'm having a hard time explaining that, but, you know, again, you'd hate to have something filled out maybe at the local or a building level and then it not come to the
Oh,
surface.
I see what you're saying. So if there's a serious instance, and Anthony, I'll let you field this because you work more with our Title IX complaints and things of that nature. If there's something that is of serious nature, you're monitoring those issues, and also Jen Larva and Brenda do too. So if something occurs and an administrator has a question as to whether or not this is a lower or medium level thing, or if it's a high level thing, then they confer with those individuals about the situation. But we do have, under section 4, point E, says reports of hazing are classified as private educational or personal information with confidential data, and so there are certain criteria as far as who we share it with. So it's not like it's shared with the whole school as far as what's going on,
Right.
or the whole staff. But in general, it's shared within the district, within the site administration. And I'm not sure, Anthony, does if Jen or Brenda or you have access to that. I don't usually have access to that, but I take report from the other administrators as far as when things come up.
Well, E also does talk about the building report taker in conjunction with the responsible authority shall be responsible for keeping and regulating access to any report of hazing and the record of any resulting investigation. So the responsible authority is
Generally the principal. But we, if we'd like to have maybe a guest principal at our next policy meeting when we read it again to kind of talk through how the process works.
that would be great.
Sure. And Mr. Bond? If you could, did you hear, so we're hoping to maybe have a principal at our next policy meeting that can kind of talk through how how this process works with our bullying and harassment so that we know about the reporting process, or perhaps Jen or Brenda if they are able to attend. Okay?
I'm going to ask you to just follow up with me after the meeting. I will be happy to follow through on it. I'm very honest, I could barely hear what you're saying. It's muffled here.
Okay.
We'll have to kind of
We'll-
figure this
we'll
out before
we'll
the
fix that
next
between the
meeting,
next
but
one.
I think that's a great idea. And for Paul and Amber, we have at times had different presentations as part of our policy meeting,
Sure.
depending on the nature of the policy and that. So that is something, we can request if we feel like we need more information. I think, I'm also just reading back to this first paragraph again that says, the Minnesota Department of Education will maintain and make available a model policy on student and staff hazing in accordance with Minnesota Statute 121A69. The MDE model policy differs from NSBA MASSA model policy as it incorporates state and federal requirements related to harassment and discrimination, which extends beyond the mandate. And then topics of harassment and discrimination are addressed in other NSBA MASSA policies. While school districts are required to adopt a policy governing student and staff hazing, school districts are not required to adopt any particular policy, but NSBA recommends this policy. So, sometimes what I've done with because of my interest is, and I didn't have a chance to do it with these, but I like to go to those statutes and just kind of learn myself more about it and kind of then look at the language in ours and see maybe where it came from. Sometimes I would go to other school district websites to see if they passed a hazing policy, and I would compare what our what they maybe changed to a model policy. Is there any other information that, just for our first reading, that you would like, or questions that you have at this point?
I'm just assuming here, but a thought that I had, a question that popped in my mind was if someone isn't comfortable reporting an incident, of harassment, are they allowed to do that anonymously? And I'm looking at the harassment complaint form, and it requires, it has a spot for a signature, so I'm just kind of talking that through, and I'm kind of assuming that if there was a complaint that was made, the principal would, investigate that anyway, even if they didn't have a signature.
In general.
That's what I'm
That
assuming.
would take place if it,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking back to my experience as a principal, sometimes you would get a report that would come in that would be super vague, and it would like, the 8th grade boys are being mean to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you didn't have any other information, it was really hard to determine, so you might ask teachers and try and figure out if there was a situation going on. But if there was, indication of what was going on, then we would definitely, like, if, during my 3rd grade reading class with Mrs. Smith, the 8th grade boys are mean to me, that's easier to investigate
Absolutely.
than that. But so we would follow through, but I would say that on occasion, if something is completely anonymously reported, it's hard to have full follow through in certain situations.
On the direction you're going with this too, and using the 8th grade boys are being mean to me kind of the example. What I think is going to be important here too is, that any individual could go to a teacher they trust, or they have a relationship with, or a counselor they trust or have a relationship with, to get a form and fill out that form. I mean, because you know how students can be, elementary, middle school, and high school, sometimes they're just afraid to say anything, but they're willing to go have that conversation with someone in the building that they have a relationship with. So, I mean, everybody that works in the building, I would say most of the adults that work in the building should have access to this form, so they don't have to go to the principal, because a lot of kids are going to be afraid to go to the principal or the assistant principal. So again, I don't know how we weave that into this, but it should be part of the reporting process.
Well,
I don't know if we need, and I'm just thinking about, sometimes the specificity of how the policy is executed isn't always within the policy, just because things might change over, like thinking, maybe we have a no hazing app that kids can use now, and I'm making this up, but there might be certain changes that happen, but the policy is more specific to how do we want situations handled than necessarily the guidance on how the policy is executed. But I do think that you're right. This is something we take very seriously. I think, unfortunately, with the technical issues and me being, I've got a lot of experience with hazing and bullying situations as a principal and as a teacher and other things, but that was in other districts, and I hate to misspeak about how we do things in detail without either having somebody closer to the work or somebody else being able to answer that right now.
So
I would also just add, if you go to, under the reporting, A kind of addresses both of those comments about a report. So A, any person who believes he or she has been the target or victim of hazing, or any person with knowledge or belief of conduct which may constitute thank you, hazing, shall report the alleged acts immediately to an appropriate school district official designated by this policy. A person may report hazing anonymously. However, the school district may not rely solely on an anonymous report to determine discipline or other remedial responses, so it gives some guidance.
Yep, that does clarify it a little bit. A second thought I had, and thank you for reading that, Rosie, sometimes people are too scared to report it immediately, so the language about immediately is slightly concerning to me, because whenever there's, an assault, sometimes it takes a little bit of time for them to be brave enough to come forth.
I agree.
Just a thought.
Thank you for pointing that out, Rosie, but I also think too, I don't think it hurts to maybe, when it says appropriate school district official, again, for a student that might see this in the policy handbook or have it explained to them from another student, I don't think it hurts to say, which might include, a teacher, counselor, a paraprofessional, or again, someone that student has a relationship with, an adult in the building. And then it could even be outside of the building too. My guess is, well, some kids are probably gonna take their parents and then
That's true.
it's gonna go that route.
Well, if you go down to C, it does, this is a different piece of it, but I think what you're getting at in terms of a variety of different people, a teacher, an administrator, a volunteer, a contractor, and other school employees shall be particularly alert. So, sometimes when policies are written, you want to use some of that same
Yeah,
groupings if they're listing. I don't know if we would want to add that same grouping, but put it,
that C gets into witnessing. Is that-
yeah, I know it does, but I'm just talking about if we wanted to,
Sure.
Use that
which
same
may
language.
include,
Sure.
kind
And
of
I'm-
include that
Okay.
same kind of stream of people.
Okay,
And I'm trying to find so I looked down at C and now I'm trying to find where we're adding that.
Well, I think we,
possibly to A.
to A, but it would be taking those listing of people, but and keeping them there in C, but also including them in,
So we could say, although, I guess we might want to spell that out differently, because I'm thinking sometimes we might have a volunteer who might not be as well trained in how to investigate, and
Well, no, reporting is totally different than investigating, so I mean, it might not be trained in how to fill out the form, I guess, or something like that. I mean, the investigation is a whole other track.
but what I'm saying is if it's reported to, if we're saying report it to a school district official, and then we list out that, if we listed out that grouping of people, a teacher, administrator, volunteer, a contractor, or other school employee, if we're saying report it to somebody and, to use, the 8th grade boys are being mean to me, if let's say it's something along those lines but more serious, if somebody talks to a custodian about it or talks to a volunteer in the classroom, they might not take it with the same level of seriousness. So I'm wondering if we need to better spell out what we're, who the district official is. I mean, I do know that everybody goes through mandatory training, if it's a case of abuse, but somebody else might take something as hazing, and I don't want somebody saying like, oh, boys will be boys, or something like that either.
I think sometimes there's a benefit to keeping it simple, whether it just says, administrator, teacher, counselor, just, because again, we can get bogged down on all the language here.
And generally, when it's coming from MDE or NSBA, they've vetted a lot of different languages, not that we can't add it, don't get me wrong, but there's sometimes a reason why they left it the way they have.
Yeah, to me, the contractor one's kind of odd, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how many kids would go to a contractor within the building, but,
I was trying to imagine too, like maybe if it was like a key zone employee that was contracted with this.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
that's what I thought of
okay,
when,
so that would
we
work.
do
But
have a lot
I was
of.
first thinking like a painter. It's like, no, but-
That would make sense. Key zone.
All right.
That's what I am.
I follow that, all right.
But this is, again, our first reading, so, I'd encourage you, this is probably a good example of one, again, to go on a couple other school districts' websites as well and see if there's any additional language, we could ask, Anthony to just see if there's some other recommended language from the training and experience that he brings, to this as well, particularly with regards to the victim having additional people to go to, I guess. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. But these are great questions.
Yes, if the board could, just please, for any questions you have, I'll make sure I follow up on them before the second reading. And I apologize for not being able to hear and respond. You probably can hear me clearly, but on my end, it's muffled. Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. So any other questions on this one then?
Process question, really.
Uh-huh.
So this goes to, and I'm fine with it going ahead to the first reading, does that, and maybe get some other input from our colleagues. Does then it come back to us next month, we revisit this again, would it automatically go into second reading, or could it be held out until we kind of?
We could hold it out, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And often what could happen after our discussion on it is any recommended changes we have would be put in it.
Right,
Before then it goes to our board for our first reading.
okay,
And then, so it could, we can hear feedback from, other board members there. Then it'll come back to us, and again, we can, make any changes. We would see any recommendations that maybe administration also has after hearing our discussion. And then, yeah, we could hold it if we didn't have any reason to move it forward more quickly.
since we don't have a policy on this and it's required by MPE, to me, it sounds like something we should try to get through as quickly as possible, hopefully maybe then by February. Can we go back and revisit it and make changes to the policy?
Yeah.
If we feel like we missed something. Okay?
Yeah, and again, when you get that additional background information from Patty, there's a listing of which policies are required we look at every year.
All right.
Or every 5 years, or there's different kind of layers of it. So there is that opportunity. Yep.
And I think that there may be, as I understand, at the bottom of the policy, there are other MSBA model policies that are impacted by this change. And we would want to make sure that when we're, we don't have those exact same policies necessarily, but when we review our policies overall to see, are there other policies that, does the bullying policy now need to be changed because we are talking about the harassment policy in this way, right?
So that's the kind of cross-reference work that, again, whenever we bring any policy that goes back to our administrators and or, our legal department at times would be someone that would review it, depending on the policy. So, yeah.
This is a pretty complex policy for our
Yeah.
first one.
Yeah.
We should have started with state travel.
Yeah, that was, this is, yeah.
I wrote that.
But it's okay, it's
Right.
okay, it's a good one.
That's fine.
And like I said, I know when I first started kind of digging into policies as a new board member too, I just found it very interesting. You will see very similar policies in other districts, pretty, word for word, but sometimes there's little tweaks that are like, you know, make you pause, for lots of reasons, so.
And I've also been in situations where policy is here, ready to go to the board, and things are brought up that need to be significantly rehashed, like, we redid student interaction with law enforcement policies when I was in Sun Prairie, and we thought we had it all ready, and we brought it to the board, and there were moderately significant concerns that came up, and so we actually ended up forming some different subcommittees and really going deep before we even brought it back again. So I think it's important that as we put policies in place, that they're policies that people feel comfortable with.
But we definitely can bring them back, so.
Okay.
So we'll move on to the next one. So this is again policy for our second reading, policy 214. And if you go to that, again, it's has the purpose of the policy, the general statement of the bylaw. This mainly deals with out-of-state travel. And as I mentioned when we went through it for the first reading, is, you know, really in my time on the board, we haven't had any out-of-state travel. Obviously, somebody has, and that's why there's a policy in the past. So it isn't one that we've used a lot in my experience, but good that we have the policy. And then if you go to the end of the policy, it does say that this policy is replacing 3 other of our current policies. We've had many policies in the past, and NSBA really has streamlined for districts, and that's why you'll see us replacing a number of policies with one policy. But the first reading of this one was back in 2015. It was adopted, then it was updated again in 2018. So you can kind of see the history every time you get a policy in front of you, that it's had in front of our district. And then again, the legal references, the cross-references on there as well. The one thing that did come up when we discussed this in our first reading was Section 5, Establishment of Directives and Guidelines. And this was guidance to the superintendent to develop a schedule of reimbursement rates for school district business expenses, etc. And so that's some follow-up that the superintendent will have on his to-do list to do with this policy. So.
Appreciate that.
So, and then I guess the only other thing is that we do get reimbursed as school board members for mileage for travel that we have in the state, and that's, we just got a notice about it, about the federal guidelines for mileage, and that's the same for school board members as well. So.
And I would assume that the superintendent's, the guidelines and schedule for reimbursement would be the same schedule and reimbursement that we use for our
Yes.
regular employees. So it wouldn't be necessarily separate work, but it would be
Exactly.
contingent on what we already have in place.
So now this policy again, there weren't any other changes that we made in it, more really discussion around that. So it'll go to our board meeting here in January, and unless there's any more questions, we as a board would vote on it, and then we'd be done with it for the time. So that's kind of the process of policies. So is there anything else? Assistant Superintendent Bonds?
For other,
Under an other? Yeah.
we do have a moderately
Yeah.
significant other,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that is again, at our last policy committee meeting, and since 2 members are new, we have the MSBA has a model policy on the vaccine requirements. Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. The federal and state regulations on vaccine mandate through OSHA. There's the emergency temporary order in place that is being examined tomorrow by the Supreme Court. And so we're waiting to see what comes of that, but this, just wanted to share this as an informational item so that if we need to act relatively quickly, we can put things into place. We can share it electronically as well, but would you like to share?
Sure. So basically, the choice of a district is able to, with the regulation, either mandate vaccines or vaccination and testing. Now, we do have a small core of programs that actually require the mandated vaccination under our Head Start through the federal program. So we'll be dealing with that separate policy, but this is just the outline. There are a few pieces that we as an organization, depending on the final outcome of tomorrow's meetings and hearings, are gonna have to just make some decisions on. So this will have some blanks and fill in pieces that we're still kind of working through the process of who the reporting pieces, you know, who's going to be responsible for making sure each site is doing the testing and those follow-up pieces.
So we just wanted the policy committee to be aware as a potential future item, depending on what happens, but also a future item that may come into play soon enough that we might even need to have, you know, an emergency special meeting of our policy committee and a special board meeting to move something forward, if we choose to go in this direction, and if we're required to go in this direction.
So any questions at this point? You know, obviously, we know you're just getting the information, so.
On this one, it seems kind of problematic to have dates on there, like no later than January 10th, 2022, when we couldn't even approve this by that date. And then it wouldn't give maybe those that aren't fully vaccinated or whatever enough time to say, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna follow up to do this. I don't know what the numbers would be that would require vaccination. I would like to think we're 90% plus vaccinated across our staff. But I don't know how we deal with that when the time comes. I mean, we've got to have some leeway to
Yeah,
adjust those
the
dates.
dates are based on the order. It is currently in place, but it's being challenged. And so the dates on the policy are based on the order that's in place, but they're not enforcing it until there's the challenge piece and the Supreme Court decision has gone through.
Until that's been decided.
And they've also said that they were going to have a stay or hold on negative consequences for anybody who isn't following the policy, or the not this policy, but the order.
Yes, the order. Yeah.
So through February 9th, I think, right?
Yes.
So
And anytime the employee does become vaccinated, they don't have to participate in the testing program, so.
Right, okay.
So it's giving them some time without negative consequences to comply if needed, it sounds like.
districts, right?
Yeah.
But in order to be fully vaccinated, people might have to move relatively quickly to make sure that they're vaccinated in time for that, once the Supreme Court decision has been made. But it's pretty complicated and convoluted, because we're awaiting a Supreme Court decision upon which we have to make immediate action to move forward. And I think both the state and government and national government entities that are working on this, it's complicated because we're all waiting, and we've had like various iterations of it's moving forward, now it's challenged, and it's not. It's moving forward, it's challenged, now it's not. So hopefully tomorrow we'll have much clearer guidance and can move forward definitively.
So we will hear if we need to set up a separate meeting just to address this.
And then at that meeting, we would have those additional details filled in where you'll see the blanks here.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd also just mention, and that in terms of just policies in general, sometimes some of these newer policies, and definitely COVID-related policies, also our school board association, through the many email updates we get from them and resources that they give to us as school board members, you might get some heads up on some of this, or more kind of articles on it, more background information. So that's I have found often with, particularly related with COVID policies, they've been a good resource for background information too. So. Okay, anything else under other? Okay. Then, I think our policy meeting for January at this point is adjourned. So thank you. And